to the webinar that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luben Kisore. And I wish to appreciate ARSO for co-hosting this webinar with Kenya. I want to appreciate the panelists who have graciously agreed to share with us their insights during this webinar, and all the distinguished guests who have joined us, and my esteemed colleagues. Good afternoon, good morning. It is with a great honor and privilege that we are co-hosting this important webinar, which is the potential of manufacturing and industrialization in Africa. And on behalf of Kenya Bureau of Standards and our esteemed partners, I wish to extend a warm welcome to all of you. Today, we gather to explore the vital topic that holds the key to unlocking Africa's economic potential and driving
We're having a small challenge on connectivity. I hope it will be coming back shortly. Sorry, we had a connectivity issue. Please continue, Esther.
Yes, my sincere apologies. I wasn't sure whether I'm the only one who has been kicked out, but my sincere apologies for that. So as we delve into this theme of building Africa's industrialization and manufacturing strength, particularly in the textile and leather industry, we must first acknowledge the significant strides that Africa has made in its industrialization agenda. The industrial development decades for Africa have laid a robust foundation, highlighting the importance of manufacturing in economic growth and poverty alleviation. Yet there is still much work to be done to realize our full potential. Industrialization is central to development. Building a productive manufacturing sector is one of the most promising strategies for creating formal jobs at scale, promoting sustained inclusive growth, and fostering modern development. Historical precedents from the United Kingdom and the United States to the Asian tigers and China have demonstrated industrialization can transform economies and significantly improve the living standards. Despite its manufacturing potential characterized by fast-growing internal markets, abundant raw materials, and a large labor force, Africa's experience with industrialization has been less than satisfactory. The manufacturing sector contribution to Africa's GDP has been stagnant or declining, with the continent's share of global manufacturing falling from about 3% in the 1970s to less than 2% at the moment. The output remains heavily concentrated in low technology products such as food, textile, clothing, and footwear. The importance of manufacturing to unlock the continent's development potential is clearly articulated in the African Union 2011 Action Plan for the Accelerated Industrial Development of Africa and reaffirmed in the Agenda 2063. The textile and leather industries in particular have a vital role in transforming countries into industrialization manufacturing-led economies. The textile and leather industry in particular holds immense promise. It is an industry that can significantly contribute to job creation, value addition, and export diversification. By developing a competitive value chain within this sector, we can transform our economies and uplift the lives of millions. However, to achieve this, we must address the challenges of quality, market access, and infrastructural deficits. The textile and leather value chains are critical components of our industrial strategy. Strengthening these value chains means improving every step of the production process, from the raw material sourcing and processing of manufacturing and distribution. By doing so, we can assure that our products are competitive not only within Africa, but also on the global stage. Participation in the global value chains requires adherence to international standards, investment in technology, and a commitment to sustainability. This integration into global markets can drive innovation, create high-value jobs, and lead to economic resilience. So what is the importance of standards, conformity assessment, and harmonization? Standards, regulation, and conformity assessments are the bedrock of a thriving industrial sector. They ensure that our products meet global benchmarks, thus facilitating trade and fostering consumer confidence. The role of standardization in enhancing the quality and competitiveness of African products cannot be overstated. It is imperative that we invest in a robust regulatory frameworks that support innovation and quality assurance. Harmonizing standards across the continent is crucial for the success of our industrialization efforts. The AFCFTA provides a framework for this harmonization, allowing for the seamless movement of goods and services across the borders. By aligning our standards, we reduce the technical barriers to trade, enhance product quality, and create a level playing field for all African manufacturers. This harmonization is not only a facilitator of trade, but also a catalyst for the regional integration and economic cooperation. As we navigate the path of industrialization, we must also address emerging issues that impact the textile industry. The crisis of climate change, which is leading to global warming, necessitates the development of standards to support the industry in transitioning to fibers and materials that offer better environmental outcomes than their conventional alternatives. For example, standards are being developed to ensure that their best agricultural practices are followed in cotton farming, regulating the amount and type of pesticides and water used, thereby ensuring positive impacts to soil health, water, and biodiversity. On the other hand, synthetic fibers pose significant environmental challenges. We are supporting textile-to-textile recycling through standards that allow the use of recycled materials in production. By doing so, we reduce the reliance on virgin-based fibers and minimize the environmental footprint of textile production. These efforts are crucial in creating a more sustainable and environmentally friendly textile industry. So, do we have opportunities, and what are the strategic initiatives? The African Growth and Opportunity Act, that is AGOA, and the AFCFTA present us with significant opportunities. Under AGOA, we have the potential to access the US market duty-free, which can be a game changer for our textile and leather exports. At the same time, the AFCFTA encourages us to look inward, to strengthen our regional markets, and to develop sustainable value chains that are resilient to global economic shocks. As we embark on this journey, it is crucial that we foster collaboration among all the stakeholders, that is the governments, the private sector, and the development partners. Our collective efforts will drive the formulation of policies that create an enabling environment for industrial growth. We must also focus on capacity building, ensuring that our workforce is equipped with the skills needed to drive a competitive global market. In conclusion, today's discussion are not just about identifying the challenges, they are about crafting actionable solutions that will propel Africa's industrialization forward. So let us seize this opportunity to share knowledge, exchange ideas, and build partnerships that will transform our textile and leather industry into a powerhouse of economic development. I am confident that with our combined efforts, we can turn the vision of a prosperous, industrialized Africa into a reality. Let us work together to create a future where our industries are not only competitive, but also inclusive and sustainable. I wish to thank all of you, and I'm really looking forward to an enriching discussion with our panelists and all the participants in this webinar. Thank you so much, Ruben.
Yeah, thank you very much, MD, for your very encouraging opening remarks. And as usual in this sector, I always tell people that if there is a sector that you cannot do away with, it is the combined leather and textiles, because every one of us at any given time, whenever we are stepping out of our houses, you find that you have a piece of leather, you have a lot of textiles on yourself. And therefore, it plays a crucial role to ensure that it is an industry that we really focus on. It's an industry that we understand has immense potential. We have the land that we can produce the materials on. We have the animals that also can give us the materials. And as it is right now, we're having a joint initiative with the African Leather and Leather Products Institute to do a quick diagnostic study in Burundi, Kenya, and Zimbabwe before we embark on creating the capacity for our people to do the tanning. In fact, the tanning is where we also find that there's a challenge that, yes, it can be done small scale, and for that matter, then we can start doing the value addition to ensure that we do not sell the raw hides and skins and lose out on the kind of products, the diversity of the products that we can have. So back to our background paper so that we can quickly set the webinar rolling. If we can have it back on. Do we have the IT? So So that now we are done with the introduction, a very enlightening opening remarks. I would like to introduce the moderator so that we can move forward. The moderator is Lydia Nkadha Kinuthia of the Department of Textile Technology, School of Engineering, Kirinyaga University. And she's also a convener of our working group, number 1, TC53, textiles and textile accessories. She's also the chairperson, the Kenya National Coordination Team for African Body Measurements, an initiative that is intended to actually come up with a study and recommendations for ready-made garments and footwear. So we are looking at the value addition, not just adding value to fabrics, but also looking at how do we get the fabrics to be the ready-made clothing articles that you can pick from the shelf based on measurements that have been done. And we have an assessment and understanding of the preferred measurements in the continent. So she's also a senior lecturer and head of department of textile technology at Kirinyaga University. She has a vast experience in teaching fashion design over the last 25 years and has been a member of several technical committees at the Kenya Bureau of Standards as well as ARSO related to textiles and body measurements, focusing on size charts for the African region. We welcome you, Lydia, and we take cognizance of your knowledge in this area and hand over to you the moderation of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ruben, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me also acknowledge that what we are doing today is very important for our African region, and it's my hope and prayer that we're going to gain much knowledge out of this, and so that we can be able to take care of the challenges that are ahead of us in the textile industry. Also, thank you, Esther Gale, for those insightful remarks. We really appreciate. We go straight to the panelists. We have 5 panelists today. We have Madam Clementine, Dr.
You can unmute yourself, Dr. Lydia.
Sorry for that. I got disconnected. My network is low. I'm very sorry for that. So we have Madam Clementine. She has been she's the project coordinator in ARSO, has been working for ARSO since 2022 as a project coordinator and currently coordinating the Textiles and Leather project. She's involved in managing activities and a sponsorship, mentoring progress in projects and implementation and performance. She's currently coordinating a project committee on African body measurements for ready-made garments, and footwear. She has participated in several workshops across the region, providing technical assistance to ARSO technical committees under the Textile and Leather Texture. She owns a bachelor's degree in economic sciences and management, and she's qualified in monitoring evaluation experts from Kenya Institute of Management, a graduate of project management and leadership from Ekima University College, and holds a certificate in international trade law and policy for Africa's Development Trade Law Center, TRALAC. Madam Clementine is going to take us through promoting intra-African trade through ready and designed body, Africa's body measurement for the clothing and footwear, and the law of standardization, ARSO initiative. So let us all welcome Madam Clementine to take us through her presentation. Madam Clementine, you are welcome.
Thank you, moderator. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Maybe you could put on PowerPoint from presentation mode. Yes, great.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm going to give you a presentation on the promoting intra-Africa trade through ready and designed African body measurements for clothing and footwear and rules of standardization, ARSO initiatives. ARSO, in brief, is an intergovernmental organization, is an intergovernmental standard body formed by African Union, current African Union and United Nations Economic for Africa, UNECA, in 1977 in Accra, Ghana. Engaged in harmonization of standards and development of conformity assessment procedure. Currently, we have 43 African member states represented by a national standard body. Our mission is to facilitate African industrialization in the intra-Africa trade and global trade by providing harmonized Africa standards and conformity assessment procedure. And there are also stakeholders. We have a Pan-African policy organization where we have African Union, FCFTA, IBA, UNEPAD, region economic communities, and on the influence and support from continental policies and political and financial support for ARSO. Also position ARSO to support the strategic African imperatives. Also, we have African National Standard Body, ARSO member state, and ARSO non-member, where we mobilize national experts to develop African standards, also to facilitate adoption and use of ARSO standards, or joint and pay membership fee. Also, we have African development users, where we have also technical committees, private sectors, regulators, consumer, and special interested group to drive development of African standards and advocate for use of African standards. Also, we have international and African organization, where we have PACI institution, AFRAC, AFRIMEX, AFSEC, and ARSO. And also we have ISO, Codex, IC, and ISTM, and also development partners to promote quality culture in Africa and benchmark to improve ARSO, and also in African influence global standard for support Africa, support ARSO. Today, textile and fashion industry represent a real economic pillar in our society. Since clothing is one of men's needs, like food or shelter, is therefore an essential part of human's life today. According to the Fashion United report, the fashion industry is valued at $3 trillion, 2% of the world GDP production, and the fashion industry in Africa is equally growing as estimated to the market, valued to 31 billion in 2020. This approximate 10% of global fashion industry value, the footwear industry, which is still growing, yet the continent has raw material, particularly leather and footwear, labor and skills. The current African trade status, the textile and clothing industry can drive industry. Leather and textile has been identified as an African continental free trade area and the regional economic community as a priority sector for African development, where we have on my left side, we have footwear and apparel and textile has been identified as the sector which can contribute to the African development. The textile and clothing industry can drive to African industrial transformation and create some of the million of jobs and for Africa. As the industry is composed a major of micro, small and medium enterprises, which can rapidly generate decent job, both skills and unskills, especially to the youth and women. Textile also estimated that up to 600% of value can be created along the cotton value chain, from cotton production, spinning, turning into yarn, weaving, tightening into fabric, follow dyeing and printing designs. Also, fashion industry is a very profitable sector. From production to market and additional jobs to wealth can be created step of living. Let's look into how textile and leather is a priority sector to boost African economy. In Article 49, the Abuja Treaty 1991, in its Article 49, asks African countries to promote development of the textile and leather industry as a priority industry sector for modernization of African economy. The Abuja Summit of 2006 on food security declared, resolved and identified cotton as a strategic African commodity and therefore target to process 50% of the cotton producer in the African continent. Also, African Union Assembly also on harmonization of standards as a priority culture in production, processing started in marketing, agro-processing under member state to promote and support also in harmonization of industrial standards. Let's look into Africa trade. As you are aware, trade and manufacturing has remained key pillar of national development. In general, Africa manufacturing sector performing at only 2% of the world manufacturing output and contributing to only 10.5% to the GDP. Intra-Africa standing at currently 16 to 17 average, which is expected to increase within its implementation of Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and is slowing comparing to the situation in Europe, where they trade at 67, Asia at 58, North America at 48, and Latin America on 20%. This is according to the report of Bank 2018 report. On the challenges and benefits of having the ready African body measurement. For Africa, fashion is a powerful drive of creative economic development and innovation, creating many jobs, especially women and young people. However, a major challenge in African fashion industry is the lack of standardization body measurement for garments and footwear. This absence of this standard hindered mass production as manufacturers use their own sizing system or foreign size systems that not accommodate the body structure of the African population. We have other challenges where the fitting challenges, which increased frustration of by customers, difficulty in accessing new market, where you cannot order online, where you know you will get a cloth will not be fitting you. Also, we have another challenge of a dumping ground for all kind of sizing system from other countries, where we receive kind of clothes which are not fitting, also which are not in good condition. The benefits of having African body measurements have mentioned few. To reduce material waste, standardized measurements chart serves as a foundation for the development, design, partner making, and the quality control for the product, thus enabling a decrease in waste and discharged materials. Also reducing fitting time, where a very common situation is when a customer takes multiple sizes of some items to dressing room to find out which one is fitting. This one also is another benefit when we have our African body measurements chart, where you know your sizes, then you go to the market, you pick immediately. Also, it creates a customer loyalty. To ensure customer loyalty, it's essential to provide a product that fits properly and looks attractive. In addition, for customers, it is easy to choose their garment, particularly when you are buying online. Also, you build loyalty to the brand. If you know this brand can fit, you'll just be happy to go and buy those. What ARSO is doing to address these challenges? The ARSO is promoting manufacturing industrialization, access foreign market for cotton, apparel value, and leather products. Further, we've given a mandate to provide African standards where there is no international standard, to provide African standard to promote trade. Yeah, under textile, this project, we have 3 technical committees where we have textile product and accessories, leather, footwear, and also we have a special working group which has been transitioned to project committee, African body measurement for ready garments and footwear. Also, we have conformity assessment program within 9 certification scheme. So far, under this project, we have 154 published standards, where we have products, goods 79, under services we have 2, and under analysis and sampling we have 57, and codes and grocery we have 16 standards. This is some standard which has been published under textile, footwear, and leather. So far, we have 22 member countries which are participating in this sector, textile and leather. So the country which has been highlighted down here, there are 9 countries. which the member states which are participating in the body measurements project committee, where Ghana is leading this project committee. A study has been conducted under Kenya for African body measurements. Since inaugural for this project committee, the committee has been meeting, and they have identified the summer activity which can be done. This is the structure of the project committee, where we have a committee, we have a task force, where we have a consultant, a statistician consultants to make sure the sample size which we were taking is just accurate according to the national framework. Also, we have a national coordination team, and we have measurers which will be correcting the data. So here we have started a piloting study with Kenya to develop an African body measurement chart for ready garment and footwear. For now, the key activities to develop an African body measurement chart that can be used in growing fashion industry. And now we are at phase 1, the design and planning of piloting study, where we have to develop a sample size for Kenya. Then the committee has been identified the region grouping country, which will be also conducted this study. Once we finish with Kenya, we will just proceed to the other country. Then the experience and lesson learned from conducting this pilot study in Kenya will be used to guide in the remaining 14 countries, where the data will be corrected for ready garment and footwear. As I conclude, there is so much which is needed from our member state and the stakeholder. The adoption of the harmonized standard by FCFTA status party and the implementation of the standards by industry. We need member states to support the ongoing initiatives in the leather and textile, especially African body measurement for ready garment and footwear. More countries to join technical committees and to join project committees, also to facilitate a smooth learning exercise. Also, we need to increase industry participation and contribution to the technical standards work. Here we are focusing on the industry because for fashion and textile, we really need industry for their support, where we need to correct those measurements and so on. Also, more cooperation and collaboration by member states needed into undertaking the data to inform countries' national body and measurements. Yes, we need a country to support where we are going to correct those data, to support, to give their support at national level if there is approval, the supporting document to carry out the study. Also, developing African body measurement chart. This will be used for the growing of the African fashion. Thank you. This is my end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clementine. But before you get there, I have a few questions for you, 2 questions. One, why is the textile and leather considered one of the key pillars for Africa's industrialization? And why is there a need for ready and designed African body measurements for the clothing and footwear? And hope you're noting that. The second question is, why are the regulatory challenges, and what are the regulatory challenges, and what initiatives has ARSO undertaken to address them? Just in brief, very brief, because you've alluded to some of the answers, but very brief, just give us that summary.
Okay,
Clementine,
thank you for the
welcome
question.
back.
Okay, Thank you. Thank you for the question. On the question one, why textile and leather considered one of the key pillar of African industrialization? It's because it can create millions of jobs for youth and women, who makes big part of the African population. Africa has the youngest population in the world, with 70% of sub-Saharan African under the age of 30. So the ready and designed African body measurement for clothing and footwear, the fashion and textile industry is very profitable sector, from production to marketing, since Africa is the largest market, composed of 1.5 billion. In this year, 2024, the revenue of the apparel market in Africa amounts to 70 billion. So it is the project to grow annual by 4.6%. So the largest segment in this is women apparel, with a market volume of 29 billion in this, according to the Statista. That was my response to the question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let's appreciate Madam Clementine for work well done. Now, I want for the presenters, please be brief as much as possible. And let's now welcome our next presenter, Dr. Luz Otieno, a senior lecturer at Kenyatta University. So, IT team, you can help us pull up the bio for Dr. Luz Otieno. Yes, there she is. Dr. Luz Otieno is a leading expert in anthropometrics with particular interest in 3D scanning technology, a seasoned university educationist with over 30 years teaching experience in Kenya and in Britain, an experienced and widely published researcher. Dr. Otieno owns a bachelor's and master's degrees from Kenyatta University and a PhD in clothing anthropometrics from the Manchester Metropolitan University. She led a team of researchers in northwest of England during the SICE UK, the British Anthropometric Survey in 2001, and also managed fast scanning technology in Nairobi, Kenya. Her areas of interest include national sizing surveys, 3D body scanning, clothing sizing, clothes charts, anthropometric. Let's scroll up the bio, please. Scroll up the bio ICT. It is incomplete on my side. Okay, I think we have quite a lot about Dr. Otieno. She's seasoned in anthropometric, and let's now welcome her to tell us more about apparel sizing, designation and labeling, anthropometry, apparel sizing and design, and standardization, and the benefits to production, manufacturing, and trade in the textile and leather industry, and the challenge of the secondary clothes in Africa, government policy regulations, and national perspectives. Quite a mouthful information there she's going to give us. So welcome, Dr. Luz Otieno. Dr. Luz, karibu.
Yes, asante sana. Let me try and project it. Ooh. Can you hear me, Dr. Lydia?
Yes,
Doctor,
yes, loud and
everything
clear.
has gone
Yes.
blank on my side.
We can hear you.
Yes, but everything has gone blank on my side.
So do we project for
yes,
you?
please project for me. Ooh. What is this? Hello. Hello.
Yeah, the IT people are looking for it. Just hold a bit.
Ooh, rapid.
Hello, Dr. Tino. Can you share it once more through our email systems, please? Kindly.
Right. Let us see.
It's okay. We have it. We are presenting it
Oh,
shortly.
you have it.
Yes,
Okay,
please.
let's go back and
Yes,
see.
the IT team is presenting it shortly.
Yes, everything is blank.
It is being uploaded.
Yes. Okay. If we go backwards to the first one, please. Yes, there we are. Thank you, everybody. This is how I look like. Rose Otieno.
Okay, let's move.
Yes, Rose Otieno from Kenyatta University.
Welcome. Please proceed.
Asante sana. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this short view of anthropometrics for apparel sizing, design, and standardization benefits for manufacturing and trade in the textile industry in Africa. Maybe we shall just start on the next slide, just talking about what anthropometrics is. And anthropometrics is the measurement of the body so that we can know the size, we can know the shape and the volume. We have had manual measurement styles and methods from the 1950s across the developed world. And the 1980s, we started having the scanning technology. But the key issues in measuring the body have been the data. How do you measure it? What data do you measure? Why do you measure? Which type of data? Who is measured and when do you measure them? These are important because then we can know the key dimensions. We can label our garments properly. I think Clementine mentioned something about labeling. We can develop size codes that are appropriate. We can develop size ranges, increments and allowances. All these things affect standards. And of course, if we measure, we shall have data which we can use for standardization for national and international groups, for example, in Kenya, and then now in the rest of Africa. Also, you measure so that it can help you for garment generation, and it can be core in the utilization of international trade. And we know that when we measure, this data can also can be utilized in sports, medicine, economics, nutrition, computer games, and for our sake, clothing. I just want quickly on the next slide to talk about, just to have a small comparison on the next slide, number 3, just to talk about what is happening in the Western countries and what is happening in Africa, in most of Africa. Only South Africa is a bit advanced, but most of Africa, there is this disparity between Africa and the rest of the world. In Western countries, they have data sets that are based on scientific data. They have expertise and training. They utilize sizing in marketing. They do a lot of research. They utilize technology, and they use it in the manufacturing of their products. And therefore, they have a competitiveness when it comes to international trade. And they have reliable size charts, and they have reliable standards based on their populations. What about Africa? Most of Africa, we have limited data. We have lack of scientific data, and if we have any, it's only manual and for small sections of the population. We have limited know-how because the knowledge of how to properly carry out anthropometric surveys is limited. We have limited competitiveness, therefore, because we have sizing confusion. You go to a shop in Nairobi, you are told it's size 14 or size 45 or size small, large, medium, 1, 2, 3, name it. And therefore, our manufacturers have lost chances of taking advantage of such information. We have also lost opportunity in international trade, and therefore we have unreliable size charts. In Kenya, I know that we have not conducted a survey on the Kenyan body in order for us to have the size charts that we can say this is a size chart for Kenyan bodies. We have utilized size charts from other places like Britain, but it's not research-based. And therefore, I pay great respect to the survey that has been proposed so that we can measure bodies. Number 5, please. And on this one, number 4, sorry. Let us just see, this is the one we have just done. So if you move one in front. Yes. I think it has jumped and left out various slides, but I can speak through them. Just yes, that one. We have had manual surveys. For example, the American ones in 1930s, the children's surveys, especially in Europe, the British surveys, 1951, 1980 for men, 1980 for children. In Germany from 1989, they had very many. But there have been issues in this manual measurement. The equipment that has been used, for example, the manual anthropometer, has issues. The procedures that have been used to measure, when you tell somebody I'm measuring your waist and you put 2 fingers behind the tape measure, or you put 3 fingers, or you have a big hand, another one has a small hand, there is that variation. So there are issues on procedures and methods. It's normally manual, it is tedious, and it's not precise. And therefore, the data that come out of that also become not precise. And also the aspects of the fact that it is contact, and how do you tell people to take off their clothes and measure them and so on. The data therefore has various errors. And for my PhD, I measured children, so I'm speaking from a point of experience. When you measure, there is that variation. Number 6, please. I won't read through everything on this one. I hope you can see, but we have had 3D body measurements as opposed to manual measurements. Size UK, of which I was a key partner, Size USA, Size Mexico, Size China, Size Canada, Taiwan, and many, many others, even in Germany and many others. And retailers in these countries and manufacturers in these countries have partnered with the organizations that deal with standardization and have come up with very useful size charts that are now being used in the industry, very useful data that is now being used in the different industries, making garments and so on, and even institutions. In other words, their 3D body measurement data has been utilized for sizing, for marketing, consumer satisfaction. When you go to a shop and you buy size 14 and you know what size 14 should be, that is what it is. And manufacturers can be able to make garments and their trading practice is best practice. There's a lot of research in it and there's a lot of trade. And that's why even in Africa, we receive garments from other countries and they seem to be consistent in size because they have standardized their size charts, because they are utilizing that 3D data that they have collected through cutting edge technology. The next one, please. And so if you look at the clothing industry and the not clothing, but the textile industry, both footwear and garments, you'll find that if you utilize the data properly, it's a scientific process which has principles and methods. The data is therefore valid and reliable, and it sorts the issues of key dimensions, size codes, labeling, size ranges, increments, and so on. And as I mentioned earlier, it feeds directly into the national and international standards that are required of garments. Now, in garments manufacture, I'll later on talk about how 3D data can be utilized. It's very, very useful because when you have 3D body measurement data, it feeds straight into those softwares that can make patterns, those softwares that generate size charts automatically, and therefore it becomes very precise. And when you sell garments, there's customer satisfaction. Today, if I went to Nairobi and bought something from a shop, it can be size 14, but when you put on, you think you are size 14 and it doesn't fit, or the sleeves are too small. And even today, because we import from all over the world, garments from Turkey, garments from China, garments from the UK, garments from Germany and so on, and America, and all these other places that export their garments into Kenya, you'll find that the garments do not fit in one way or another, or an aspect of the garment has a problem. There is variation in size and shape, and also variation in the way cultures look at garments. And when I'll be talking about secondhand clothing, I'll talk about culture and secondhand clothing. I think if you have the proper body measurements, it will fit into your target market, whichever type you want, whether it's plus size or regular size, tall, petite, and so on. It will give you a chance to focus on the niche markets. If you want mass markets, you'll have the same. If you want to customize garments for a specific type of target market, you will. And therefore, body measurements in the textile industry are key to industrialization. They are key to competitiveness. On the next one, please. Thank you. And now, by now, you must have realized that I am a key proponent of 3D body scanning over or supplementing manual body measurements. When we measure using 3D technology, we use cutting edge technology. It is quick, it is 3D and automatic, it's non-contact, and there's an ethical approach. You don't touch somebody's body. You just tell them to stand and you measure their shape, their size and volume. It is repeatable and it's a digital file. So you can manipulate it in whatever way you want. whether you want the waist to be small, waist to be bigger, you just do it instead of making the garment and then you realize it's the wrong size. Also, it's important for us in Africa to develop databases of body measurement. And I'm glad from Clementine's presentation that we are thinking of having a database for African body size. Because it will be, if we use 3D technology, it will be accurate, valid, reliable. It will have unlimited sources. And even this data can be utilized in other areas, for example, ergonomics, for example, health and nutrition, for example, sports. You can do it. You can know whether people are going to the gym and losing weight and at the waist, at the hip, and you are precise, you are scientific. It also generates 3D models, which are true to scale. So manufacturers can utilize those in online shopping and so on. And also in manual measurement, we do it by hand. We have to find landmarks. We have to develop size charts by hand. But if you did it 3D, then you have survey data that you can utilize in made to measure. You can have size charts and customization. Also, because you save the data as automatic files, you can go back to it again and again. You can compare Uganda data with Ghanaian data. You can compare Kenyan data with Egyptian data. Now, also for manufacturers, you can export the CAD systems data. I mean, you can export the data to CAD systems for automatic pattern generation. And they also, if you have this data in 3D, it enables sales manageable information. Why? If you are selling in Nairobi and you have size 18, which has run out of stock, everybody can see size 18 is over, including the people who are making the garments. So they can make size 18 more for next time, instead of making size 12 and then people don't buy it. The only disadvantage about 3D body scanning data is that you need the know-how and there's a cost to it. And usually it is proprietary. And what can stop us Africans putting together different companies to work together so that they have proprietary data and we can utilize it as we want. Whoever wants to come and utilize the data, it is ours, it's proprietary, and therefore there'll be legal procedures to follow. So this can be a good way of moving forward using cutting edge technology, which is being used across the world. The next one, please. Now, I've already mentioned some of the benefits, but just to point out that when we have 3D data, which is digital, we can now customize fit and products. We can now standardize sizing. We can have automatic pattern generation. We can talk about grading and all those activities that go on before a garment is ready. And I had mentioned earlier on that we can have customer or consumer satisfaction because the garments will fit according to the size chart for that population. And that is why in 3D scanning, collaboration becomes very important, because then all the partners can come together and work together for a common good. And I'm delighted that we are doing something about it, albeit manual measurement. It can also encourage interdisciplinary research and education. And I think even uptake of technology in manufacture and trade. Competitiveness in the market. I think one of the earlier speakers, I think it was director, you talked, Esther, you talked about having benchmarks and having confidence in our manufactured goods and so on. Maybe I need to add here that local manufacturers need support. And how can we support local manufacturers? We need to use cutting edge technology, which may not necessarily be expensive compared to the manual one, so that they can gain competitiveness in the market. And of course, I've mentioned that there can be partnership for funding research, and so that we can build an anthropometric database for Africans, which we can now utilize amongst the partners with propriety. Next one, please. Thank you. Now, I want to move specifically into the manufacturing scene, where we can make customized fit and body shape analysis. We can also, in there, manufacturers can do standardization and size charts, mass markets, online shopping, develop different targets, and then we can produce 3D products. We test them, we verify them. After validation, now we make the garment. But if we do it manually, and we have this data going through various processes, the validity can easily be lost. And as I mentioned earlier, that it is automatic. It will give you specific data for specific sections of the body. If you wanted to change the sleeve shape and style, then the joint locations and segments become very important. Most of these 3D softwares have this in place, and therefore the output becomes very, very easy to use. Also, as I mentioned, there's seamless data export through the system so that manufacturers can utilize them, the data, and they can utilize using different file formats, which can then be beneficial instead of making patterns manually and moving to something else manually or with using the machine. It will provide size recommendation, interactive tools, and even batch processing. And if it is for example, you are doing it in sports, you want to see whether Rose has lost or gained weight after doing various exercises and so on, or Rose wants to appear slimmer at the waist, then you can do it in these systems. 3D data body measurements are very important and useful. The next one, please. Thank you. Now, I think I'm still within time. I think there was the second part of my question, which was on secondhand clothing, which is that, are there any advantages and disadvantages of having the secondhand trade in Africa? I think there are many countries in Africa which have got this secondhand trade. In Tanzania, I know there were some people who were not very happy with it. They used to call it Kafa Ulaya. Kafa means they died. Ulaya is abroad. So it means this garment, I'm looking at it suspiciously because it might have been for a dead person or whatever. And that used to interfere with the socio-psychological aspects of buying secondhand clothing. But today, for example, in Kenya, secondhand clothing is almost in every town. And we want to look at advantages and disadvantages. In my opinion, it's slightly cheaper than the newly made garments. And also it allows the populace to access fashion. We can access here in Nairobi, the place where we sell garments is called Gikomba. It's the biggest secondhand clothing in Africa, secondhand clothing center in Africa for sales. And once you go there, you see all sorts of fashion, whether it is designer fashion or it is other brands and so on from Europe, America, everywhere, it is there. So it allows accessible fashion. And we know fashion is not just for covering the body. It has social, cultural, and psychological aspects to it. And so that accessibility is very important. Secondhand clothing offers employment and supports livelihoods. And many people are employed. And I'm using the example of Kenya, that in Nairobi today, and even in other cities in Kenya and towns in Kenya, secondhand clothing is everywhere. You find people selling and people buying, and it supports livelihoods. Secondhand clothing allows trade, allows circularity, that garments that one group may not need, will go to another group and be used and used and used, second and third user, and sometimes even the fourth one. Second-hand clothing allows us to reduce landfills. In some places, there are no landfills because people use every second-hand clothing item that there is. It is popular, not just across Kenya, but I know in other countries, it is popular. It also supports eco-fashion. There is recycling, there is reuse, there are some biodegradable fabrics that disintegrate and so on. But also, growth of this trade allows the growth of SMEs. And therefore, we cannot say we want to do away with second-hand clothes market or trade. I think I'll be proposing some of the solutions towards how we could go about it. But before we reach there, let me talk about disadvantages. There are no clear policies, and I'm mainly using Kenya and literature that I've read from across Africa. In many countries, there are no clear policies yet on how and which second-hand clothing do we import in the country and what goes around it. In fact, if you went to Gikomba, the big market that I talked about, you can be shocked because there are warehouses, there are big lorries coming to carry the bundles away. There are also leftovers which are just on the ground and people are stepping on it. Sometimes some of these garments are unusable. And so there is the feeling that the Western world is dumping their clothes in Africa. Instead of putting in their landfills, they are putting them in Africa. Sometimes these clothes are not sorted. Sometimes they are unsuitable for the culture in which they are brought in. And also, now the current thinking is that circularity is better than the linear model of utilizing fashion, that fashion can be reused again and again. But because we have all these clothes coming in, people are tempted just to use and throw them or give to the next person and they throw it wherever they want. There are also some health-related practices. For example, some of the clothes have come very dirty or torn or not usable. There is also environmental pollution and even incineration. And in Nairobi, Kenya, we have the Nairobi River. And some sections of it have been choked by this secondhand clothing floating in the river. Also, another point is that if we do not moderate secondhand clothing trade, it can stifle the local trade, the local manufacturing. Why? Because people will ignore the local manufacturing, whether you have cotton or not, people will ignore it and they just go to the cheaper versions. Another thing is that there are some fibers that are not reusable or recyclable. And therefore, there is no solution for after the last user, that you will use it and you'll still remain with a fiber which you must dispose of. So there is no place for it to go. And there have been some researchers have done some researches, especially in Kenya, and have found that some of the materials and fibers and fabrics that are used are non-degradable. And therefore, even after the last user, they are not usable. You can't throw them away. They have to remain and exist somewhere. And also just to point out that there are inadequate infrastructures to handle all these issues that we are talking about in secondhand clothing. The next one, please. I won't read all the stuff I've written on this one about related regulatory policies in Kenya regarding secondhand clothing, but just to mention that there is an effort to try and manage the infrastructure and the process. And that's why if you look at the Kenya Vision 2030, we are looking at industrializing the nation, including in the area of fashion and textiles, but it has to be moderated. When we talk about industrializing, do we have the machines? How can we make sure that the manufacturers have these machines to make these garments to be made locally, but to be competitive in quality and workmanship and price and size and everything? And that's why I think the issues of standardization come in, because the products that we are making for industrialization have to be competitive, but they must also be standardized, and even the processes must be standardized. And so we have the Kenya Constitution that talks about conservation. We have the Environmental Management Act, and all these acts that I have listed, Climate Change Act. But I want to point on this last one, number 9 and 10, which is circular economy, solid waste management for urban areas. I think this is the one that tries to address the issues of clothes that are being brought in as secondhand clothing, but they are not usable and they just go. The other one is the extended producer responsibility. This one is the EPR 2021, which means that when we get the secondhand clothes imported from wherever, we should have a policy agreement so that, for example, the manufacturers who are out of Kenya, who make garments that are plastic and other material oriented, which cannot be degradable, are held responsible for part of the cleaning of the rivers, part of the cleaning of everything. Because some of, as I mentioned, some of these materials are not degradable. Let's go to the next one, please. Now, just, and this is almost the third last slide, just the proposals for managing secondhand clothing. And we know that we get over 100 million kilograms of clothing in Kenya, and 35 million kilograms are discarded. Kenya is a top importer. We cannot move out and say we don't want to trade with other people, but we must look at approaches that transform this waste, maybe into new fibers, new fabrics. And we have a few companies that do that. We should have policies that talk about importation of these clothes, sorting, environmental care, and taxes. And also there should be a balance between local manufacture with what we get from outside in terms of secondhand clothing. There should be efforts to support the local manufacturer in the many issues that they have raised up in various researches like electricity, logistics, and even undue competition. And I had already mentioned EPR, but I want to add the CSR is very important, because if we have clothes coming to Gikomba, which is our biggest place where people sell secondhand clothing, then we should be also do the CSR of taking care of the environment. Where do these rags that are left, where do they go to? Who should be responsible of cleaning the place? And we should also encourage circularity. And there are very many efforts in Kenya. I won't go into it. Many efforts in Kenya where circularity is done. For example, old jeans are now mixed with other fabrics and they make very beautiful baskets, which Kenyans call chiondo. Very beautiful baskets made from sisal and mixed with jeans material, such things and so on. In Kisumu, for example, Kisumu is one of the towns in Kenya. We have people that collect skin from fish and they mix it with other materials and they make other fibers and fabrics. And I think we should have policies on environmental preservation and what happens to those non-recyclable fibers. Let's go to the next one, please. Thank you. And aiming to clean, repair, repurpose, resize. But my opinion, and it's a personal opinion, is that we do not need to shut down the export garments from other countries. I think we need to reform the practices through policy so that we do not have other countries transferring waste that they don't need to the African countries. If we have policies and we have memoranda of understanding, then we shall deal with these issues holistically. We shall reduce the health risks and even the environmental risks. And even in the process of making the garments, there should be the eco-design criteria that are used to guide those who are making these garments on how these garments or these materials will fit into an environment like an African environment. Plastic taxes in many countries, and I had mentioned EPR. I'm just suggesting that perhaps there should be fees that is put on there so that we can have extended producer responsibility. And just to address the sheer volumes of cheap clothing, the poor quality, because if they are sorted properly from where they come, and it is labeled clearly, they have been sorted by company A, company B. I'm aware there are various companies, for example, in Europe that sort out. But sometimes you find that we have garments that come from Europe, for example, and they are taken to Pakistan, and they are sold here as secondhand clothing. And sometimes you cannot trace, there's no traceability of the country of origin, the materials used, or the methods that have been used. And we should address the issue of who bears the cleanup of overproduction. Too many garments being produced, and now too many being thrown away. The last one, please. So I go back to my first point, which was on 3D scanning technology. And I want to quote David Baird, and he said, when one studies books, one knows how things ought to work. When one studies humans, one knows how things really, really work. And I would imagine that if we scanned the African body, we shall be able to know exactly what is the size, whom have we measured. We do the statistics, we link it to manufacture and consumer satisfaction. So I support that we may be wanting to go the 3D way in order to compete with other countries, because manual measurement was done a long time ago in 1980s, 1990s. A lot of people, measured manually. So how can our data compare with those? We want to make garments where the left sleeve is the same as the right sleeve, where the collar sits properly on, where manufacturers make money, and so on. The last one, I think, yes. So, dear ones, my conclusion is this, that I'm calling for partnerships for 3D body scanning in Africa in order that we can generate databases for the benefit of the clothing industry through manufacture and global trade. And also, just to put this rider, that 3D body measurements technology is a panacea for solving all issues related to sizing, and especially manufacture and trade, and even the after use of the garments. And on secondhand clothing, I'm proposing that we have regulation and balance. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed making the presentation. Thank you. Okay. All right. Moderator, are we still there?
Very insightful, but a few.
Oh, I can't hear. Ooh. Dr. Lydia, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, I
we
can.
hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. Issues of network. Yes, the questions for you, Dr. Loss. We're saying, looking at the apparel landscape in Africa, the question is, why is the apparel industry key to Africa's industrialization? And what is the benefit? What are the benefits of anthropometry, apparel sizing and design for the sector in the manufacturing industry? That's, on focusing on the apparel industry. Then you've also mentioned quite a lot on the second-hand clothing. We have advantages and disadvantages. And looking at the list, the disadvantages were quite more than the advantages. But the question that we are asking is, should the second-hand clothes be allowed in the African market? Looking at it being a source of employment to many, they are cheap. So what should be done to address the intricate balance between the job creation and the promotion of manufacturing in Africa? Kindly respond to those two very fast.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
The first one, body measurement is key and core to industrialization in Africa. Because as we have mentioned earlier, it provides employment, different professions are in it, it supports livelihoods, and best of all, it will provide competitiveness, especially if we use new technology. And also just the fact that different countries, and I was looking at different countries across Africa, most initiatives talk about the clothing industry in very favorable terms, and they want to support it. So it is very important, it's core to industrialization. And also just in talking about emerging issues, I think one of the issues is how do we industrialize and make sure that it is eco-industrialization? I think by different countries having standards bodies that are active and looking at these issues, it can help a lot. Because in Africa, we have a lot of training schools for fashion, training schools that teach people how to make garments and also everything else. And so I think industrialization of Africa has clothing and textiles at its core. We can't leave it. We must go in it. And the area of clothing and textiles gives us an opportunity to use new technology, cutting edge technology, which we can utilize. And from the people who are designing to the manufacturers who are making to the consumers who are buying it, and for general trade, it is good. And it is the cornerstone of industrialization in many countries. Thank you so much. The other one, if that is okay. And I think it was Clementine. It was Clementine who talked about the different treaties across Africa that are trying to bring together the issue of standardization and to make sure that we look at current issues about the clothing and textiles area and to have harmonization. The other one was the second-hand clothing. I think in my presentation, I've mentioned some, but I can just pick out the issue of policies must be there. The issue of responsibility. What happens after things go wrong at the end? The extended producer responsibility and CSR issues must be supported. And then also you cannot stop the second-hand clothing. People in Kenya would almost swallow you up. But I have my students who go to the Kenyan markets to go and collect designer wear, and they come with it and they show me, Dr. Otieno, look inside and outside and tell us whether it's genuine or not. So there are a lot of people like them who value those fashions. So the solution is not to shut down, because you'd be shutting down livelihoods and professional input and so on. I think the solution is to look at it holistically and try to have policies that will support both the local market and the second-hand market. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. for that, and for very insightful. And thank you also for the panel members. Those with the questions, kindly put them in the chat. Our next presenter is Mr. Malose Anthony. Mr. Malose Anthony is Chief Director Bilateral Trade Relations, Department of Trade Industry and Competition in South Africa. He currently serves as the director of the Bilateral Trade Relations, Rest of Africa in the Trade Branch in the DTCI. In this position, he is responsible for bilateral trade relations between South Africa and all the foreign countries outside the African continent, that is within America, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. Before this position, Mr. Malose served as a Minister of Economics at the Embassy of South Africa in Washington, D.C. between April 2017 and June 2022. Before taking up the position in Washington, D.C., he occupied the positions of Director, Americas, and the Deputy Director, North America in the Trade Branch of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition in South Africa, as well as positions in Economist and Assistant Director in International Trade, the International Trade Directorate at the Department of Agriculture, Land Reformation and Rural Development. Mr. Malose started his career as a research assistant at the University of Pretoria on a project looking at economic impacts of climate change on the South African agricultural sector. He then pursued a career as an environmental economist at the CSIR, working on estimating market values of environmental goods and services with the projects of national importance under his belt. Malose obtained his Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from the then University of North, now University of Limpopo, Master of Science in Agriculture Economics from University of Pretoria, postgraduate diploma from Graduate School of Business from University of Cape Town, and Master of Commerce in Development Theory from Wits University. Mr. Malose has a vast experience in trade, and the topic for today is going to present is on Beyond 2025, the future of AGOA and a framework for post-AGOA engagement, the opportunities, impact, challenges, and the apparel trend, and the rules of origin and AGOA, critical analysis. And maybe with that, you will tell us whether once the AGOA ceases in 2025, we are going to continue with it or not. Welcome, Mr. Malose, and please kindly make your presentation, and you can make it as brief as possible because of time. Let's all welcome Mr. Malose, to take us through.
Good. I'm not sure if you can see me. Good afternoon, and good afternoon, moderator. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, we are hearing you. Try to go on.
No, thank you very much, and good afternoon to fellow panelists and to the participants. And it is a great pleasure for myself to participate in this webinar, and also to thank ARSO for organizing this webinar. From our side, being from the DTIC, we worked very well with the ARSO last year together with our colleagues at the South African Bureau of Standards when we hosted the AGOA Forum, and in particular, there was a side event around standards. We really very much appreciated that cooperation. Are you able to see the presentation?
Not yet. If you can try to share again.
All right. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, just put it on a presentation mode.
All right. So you are able to see the presentation now?
Yes,
We
you
can
can,
see it,
but
but
put
could
it
you
on a
put it on a
presentation mode.
slideshow?
All right. I will try to be very brief, colleagues. I think the first one, I just wanted to sketch the trade framework that we as African countries have with the United States in terms of our exports. And I think, moderator, I'll try to respond to some of the questions that have been raised, in particular, your last questions on AGOA beyond 2025. But first, just to indicate that as African countries or sub-Saharan Africa countries, we do export to the United States first under the most favored nation clause of the WTO. And we also have unilateral preference schemes under AGOA, but also under the older market access program, being the generalized systems of preferences. Morocco is the only one country in the continent that has concluded a free trade agreement with the United States. And we have AGOA is meant to expire in 2025. So we now also, I think in 2020, the general systems of preferences, since it was extended by, I don't know, by 5 years, it expired in 2020. And because of the AGOA legislations, the GSP has been legally integrated into AGOA, meaning that for all AGOA eligible countries, the GSP has not expired. It will expire at the same time as AGOA in 2025. Just trying to go through the presentation here. And I also just wanted to indicate the countries that are currently eligible for AGOA. We do have, out of the 49 sub-Saharan Africa countries, only 45 countries are eligible for AGOA or can form part of AGOA. The other 2 have not applied, and 2, if you reach a high income status, you do get graduated from AGOA. Currently, we have only 32 countries that are classified that can be are eligible for AGOA. And in terms of the preferences, we do have around, in total, over 5,000 tariff lines that from African, sub-Saharan Africa countries that can go into the United States under AGOA or a GSP. And in terms of the sectors, you do have agricultural products. Almost all the sectors are covered, with the exceptions the US considered sensitive, such as canned peaches, some mineral products like manganese, electrolytic manganese metals, and some textile products. But generally, AGOA and GSP covers most of the products that are produced in the continent. And if you look at the US IT study that was done in 2022, it indicated that I think around 32 or 38% of US tariff book is 0 rated. So if you add AGOA and GSP, for African countries, 85% of our products can get into the US market duty free. And in terms of the rules of origin, we are expected to meet the local content of around 35%, and the other balance can be imported elsewhere, including from the United States, whereby the content cannot exceed 15%. AGOA also provide for accumulation, meaning that we can, as African countries, we can import inputs from each other and produce products that we can still export to the United States. With regard to the sector under focus today, there is under AGOA, we do have what we call a third country fabric provision that allows countries, AGOA eligible countries, to source yarn and fabric elsewhere in the world and still meet the rules of origin for market access under AGOA. And this provision is reserved largely for countries classified as least developed under AGOA. And for South Africa, we have not been included under this provision. And again, just to expand further on the rules of origin, there are a number of groupings, but I think in essence, what you will see that you can source yarn or fabric from the US or from one or more AGOA beneficiary countries or even elsewhere and still qualify for market access under AGOA. And you have what the last part being the hand-loomed category, what we normally call category 9 or grouping 9, whereby you have hand-loomed and other handmade that can still qualify for market access to the US. So generally, for AGOA, for most African countries, they do qualify for third country fabric provision, where you can source yarn or even fabric for other from elsewhere, including from African countries and elsewhere outside the continent. But for the category 9, all countries, including South Africa, can export those products. And what is important to mention also here is that there is a requirement, if you were to export textile products, to have what is known as a visa. And for South African exporters, the South African Revenue Services, SARS, is the one that is responsible for issuing such kind of a visa. I also just wanted to indicate in terms of the utilization of AGOA by various sub-Saharan Africa countries. We have Nigeria being the largest user of AGOA, followed by South Africa. You have Kenya, you have Madagascar, and Ghana being the other larger beneficiaries of AGOA. But I think what you'll see more and more as you go through down the slides, you'll see that more African countries still have to use or benefit, or they are exporting less products. I think it will be for quite a number of reasons that I will discuss a little bit later in the presentation. But I think on this one, we just wanted to show that, yes, there are a few countries that are benefiting, which is quite important, but there's still more that can still benefit from the AGOA program. The other thing that we also wanted to show is that we do have the largest beneficiary sector under AGOA is minerals, mineral fuels, in particular petroleum, and so on. That goes to the US, but we also have vehicles that are beneficiaries of AGOA. But apparel and clothing is the third largest beneficiary sector under AGOA. So I think apparel is quite an important sector coming from a number of countries. Either you look at Kenya, you look at Madagascar, Mauritius, Lesotho, Eswatini, and others that are major beneficiaries of AGOA, in particular for textiles. But we do have other products, but apparel and textiles amounts is the second largest non-petroleum sector under AGOA. Here we just wanted to show that AGOA, in particular for South Africa, but it may be for other AGOA eligible countries. For South Africa in 2023, around 23%, 21% of our exports in 2022 was AGOA, 4% was GSP, and in 2023, AGOA was around 23%. So AGOA plays quite an important role in terms of assisting our exports, but most of our exports still goes to the United States under MFN, meaning if you look under MFN for South Africa, it will mean around 75% of our exports goes to the US under MFN. And I also wanted to touch on the issue of utilization of AGOA preferences. If you look at the last part of the table, you'll see that in the last 5 years, under AGOA, the utilization has been increasing, in particular for South Africa, from 21%, and now it stands at around 28% in terms of the That will be in terms of the value. But if you look in terms of the tariff lines, you will see that it has increased from 390 in terms of in 2019, and that increased to 520. And again, you'll recall that we've mentioned that the total products that can be exported under AGOA is over 5,000, and that 5,000 covers GSP is 3,400, and AGOA is 1,800. So you'll see that all out of that over 5,000 tariff lines, all in all, we are from South African side, we are exporting 816, meaning that there is still a lot. I think the previous speaker spoke about industrialization and the need to for Africa to export more products and enter into new sectors. So I think we do have an opportunity to grow our industrial base if we were to start producing products that we can use AGOA to export. Of course, there are a number of challenges in terms of why we are underutilizing AGOA. Others may be in terms of the current exports. We do have tariff barriers like Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminium, whereby the US determined that imports of foreign steel and aluminium threaten their national security, and they imposed 25% tariffs on steel and 10% on foreign aluminium. So those tariffs remain for, I think, for all African countries, ourselves, South Africa, and I think to an extent Mozambique are facing those tariffs. And Africa being mostly in producing agricultural products, we do have sanitary and phytosanitary measures that limit our exports into the US. So that is also another barrier, but also the limited productive capacity, why we are not able to produce for South Africa beyond 800 tariff lines. So we need to industrialize. And again, in terms of the topic of today, most of our products, as we industrialize, issues around standards will have to come into play. So we do have currently, you find that some of the exporters, for the product to be exported to the US, some products have to be tested outside the continent. So that increases the cost of exporting, a cost of the products, and makes some of the products not competitive. So addressing issues around standards will also be very critical if we were to increase utilization, but also increase our share of industrial products to the US. To answer the question around the future of AGOA beyond 2025, I think what we have, the African Ministers of Trade met in Washington just before the AGOA Forum in July, and they adopted a number of positions. And one of those is to engage the members of Congress to renew AGOA for a minimum of 16 years. And that also applies to the third country fabric provision, and also to address the issue of graduation, such that countries that have reached high income status don't get graduated. I think the issue of third country fabric provision is quite important because currently most of our countries in the continent are importing either yarn or fabric outside the continent to be able to do the apparel. So that is why the ministers agreed that it needs to be continued. Of course, there are others that are saying that we need to diversify or consider producing some of this yarn and fabric in the continent. So for that, we'll need investment to be able to produce our own yarn and fabric in future. The other issue that the ministers agreed is that for the US to retain all AGOA beneficiary countries, everyone, South Africa, and I've mentioned South Africa, but it can also apply to Mauritius, as the country was also about to reach high income status. So as a result, we are saying all countries should be retained so that we can preserve the regional value chains. I think in terms of the regional value chains for textiles and clothing, we have the US ITC study has indicated about the regional value chains that exist between Madagascar and Mauritius. And also, I think in the Southern Africa region part, we do have ourselves, South Africa, Lesotho, and Eswatini, whereby we continue to exchange a number of inputs in the clothing and the textile sector. And also AGOA will support our regional industrialization and also the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So that is why we are saying that all AGOA eligible countries need to be retained in the renewed AGOA. And again, I think another important point to mention, the ministers also indicated that in the new AGOA, there is a need to allow for accumulation in AGOA with all all countries that have signed and ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area, and so that we can create those regional value chains, not only amongst the AGOA eligible countries, but also with all the countries under the ACFTA. So here, I think it's quite important if Congress were to do this, this will allow us to source inputs, not only within Sub-Saharan Africa, but also from countries in North Africa. There was also an indication that this also came in 2015 when AGOA was extended, whereby African countries were encouraged to draft the AGOA utilization strategies that will identify products that we want to export, but also the challenges that those products are facing, so that we can come with mechanisms to address those challenges and increase AGOA utilization. So that is just a summary of some of the positions of that the ministers have taken. But all in all, I think we are requesting the US Congress, since AGOA is an act of Congress, to consider renewing AGOA by a minimum of 16 years beyond 2025. I think now we are left with around 11 months to September 2025. So we hope AGOA Congress can start looking at the legislation to renew AGOA. Moderator, that will be the end of my presentation, and I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Marose, for that. Maybe one or two questions for you. You mentioned that you've given us a list of countries, and there are some that have benefited and others have not. But the question we are asking you is, in what ways is AGOA beneficial to Africa? Now, given that there are those who took advantage of it and those who did not, how should Africa deal with the post-AGOA? I think you've mentioned something to do with that. Maybe in summary, also you could tell us, why is it critical for the African governments to address, what is critical in the African government to address in the context of textile and leather industry when it comes to the rules of origin in the post-AGOA and the context of AFCFTA opportunities? Maybe in a nutshell, in a few sentences, you can respond to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, moderator. I think just in short, AGOA, why it's important for us and why it's important for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. It provides for accumulation, whereby we can source inputs from each other. We can source inputs from each other. We can, as I've indicated, to look at in terms of Madagascar, Mauritius, and other countries, whereby inputs can be sourced from either from Mauritius to Madagascar. There is production there, and it gets a market to the US under AGOA. For South Africa, in terms of the automotive, we have wire harnesses that are coming from Botswana, seeds from Lesotho, and copper from Zambia, and other rubber from either Cameroon or DRC that comes into the automotive that get assembled here in Pretoria and then gets exported to the US under AGOA amongst other markets. So that is the critical nature of AGOA. In terms of the textile and clothing, I think the two important points that the ministers are making, one is around the issue of visa. All other preferences into the US, they are not required to have visa because already when you export under AGOA, US will do the audits, your rules of origin will be looked at. So I think one of the things we are saying to the US is for them to do away with the issues of visa so that you can export textiles and clothing without the visa. The second issue will be around the third country fabric provision. I think on this matter, one is to allow African countries to source inputs, yarn or fabric elsewhere so that we can produce the clothing and other textile material and export to the US. But that can be complemented with investment. So we need more investment into the apparel and textile sector so that as a continent over time, we can start producing our own yarn and fabric. So I think discontinuation of the third country fabric will affect us negatively, in particular those countries that are using third country fabric provision. So I think, moderator, that is where I would like to leave it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. With the visa and the sourcing of the fabric, I think that is a challenge to the Africans. And once we overcome that, then we'll be able to take advantage of our work. Our next, let's all appreciate our presenter for the work well done. Our next presenter is Ms. Ellen. Ms. Ellen is a senior regulatory specialist, has been working at the Bureau of Veritas for that 3 years. She's currently responsible for developing new and updated regulatory and testing guidance. She also provides training and customer service support to clients and internal staff and is a certified auditor. Under the ANSI, Standards Alliance and ASTM, she has participated in workshops for East African countries, Vietnam, and Standards Alliance partners in Peru. Ellen is a member of certified trainer for ASTM in the area of general textile methods, flammability of children's repair, flammability of general wearing apparel. He is the past chair of both ASTM D1552 flammability and D1363 labeling committees, now sitting as the vice chair of both committees. Ellen is a voting member of ASTM 1363 Home Furnishings and is participating in F1519 for development of new wearable blanket standard and F1574 weighted blanket standards. She is an ASTM liaison chair between ASTM D1352 Flammability Committee, F08 and CGSB for 10th flammability and the US delegate acting as the ISO secretary for the US TAC committee for TC38. Ellen is also a participating member and ASTM D1344 textile sustainability. Outside the ADSTM, Ellen actively participates as a member of the International Association of Bending and Furniture Labeling Officials and various ASTCC committees, ASTM member since September 2003. Join me together as we welcome Ellen to give us a presentation on US care labeling of textile wearing apparel in certain peace rules. So welcome, Ellen, and give us your presentation kindly.
Can you see it?
We are seeing you, not the presentation.
Okay, hold on one second. Sorry.
Okay.
The logistics of computers is somewhat challenging sometimes. I can see it. So give me 1 second. Bear with me here.
Okay.
Can you see it now? Or do you see the notes version?
No, not yet, not yet.
Okay. Share.
Yes, that is now.
Okay, do
Kindly
you
go
see,
on.
did you see the presentation mode version?
Yes, yes, we can see. Yes,
Okay.
we can see it now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I want to thank everyone for this wonderful presentation and the participation and invitation to participate on behalf of ASTM US and our efforts to work through several different regulations in the US. The one I will be speaking today about is the standard guide for care labels for care instructions on textile products. This standard has been in effect for quite some time, so we'll get started. So basically, under D, as part of the labeling committee for several years, and I recently stepped out as vice chair, we've had the ability to update this standard to reflect current practice in the industry. So this is a guide that provides uniform system of symbols of care labels on textile products. And they have been outdated because there has been some work and some legislation that has rolled out in some of our states to ban specific chemicals for use when processing products for laundering and dry cleaning. So with that in mind, we have had the challenge to update our standards. Part of the standards committee that we work with, in addition to just care labeling, is many different regulations are affected by the work we do. And the reason being is the Consumer Product Safety Commission and also the Federal Trade Commission, both regulating and enforcing bodies, government bodies in the United States, look to the industry to address some of these issues and to provide guidance through our standards and to make sure they're up to date. So as under D13, which is the Textile Committee in the US, our committee was formed in 1914. It has 605 members participating currently, which represent both manufacturers, importers, brands, retailers, academia, industry groups, test laboratories, and also government bodies. As you can see from this, yes.
Sorry to disturb, but on our screen we are seeing webinar speakers.
You're seeing the speaker notes?
Well, no, we are seeing webinar speakers, keynote address, which I think maybe it could not be relevant for this. We have a list of names of the individuals.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ah, yes, now. Okay,
Yeah, okay.
now it's okay.
I'm so sorry.
Yes,
I'm talking away. So anyhow,
okay, that's okay.
so sorry. So under our D13 committee, we have 311 proof standards. We have 11 new work items being registered. We have 21 technical subcommittees. And what we do is we address not only standard methods of test for performance, but also we provide guidance to the industry in the form of guides or in the form of methods that may be referenced or the basis for some of the federal law in the United States. So as you can see here, under the care labeling law, we have updated our standard guide for care symbols on textile products. So under the jurisdiction of the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, there's a law known as 16 CFR Part 423. This law sets requirements for the consumer for carrying of wearing apparel and provides guidance for routine care and for wash and dry cleaning procedures that would affect the performance of the garment overall. So what does the regulation do? The regulation, you will find definitions and interpretations of terminology and logistics of labeling. The law also points to the ASTM method to reference for the care symbols that are endorsed by the FTC. The regulation requires manufacturers and importers of textile wearing apparel and certain piece goods which are sold in the United States to provide regular care instructions at the time the products are sold to the consumer through the use and the care symbols and or care instructions need to be visible at the point of sale. So what is defined in the law? First of all, what we do is we look to a law and its regulations by definition, by reviewing the definitions. So the scope of the law affects not only textile wearing apparel, but certain piece goods. So a certain piece good means any textile product sold by the piece from bolts or rolls for the purpose of making home sewn textile wearing apparel. It can include remnants of which the fiber content is known, that is cut by or for a retailer, but does not include manufacturer's remnants up to 10 yards long that can be clearly and conspicuously marked as pound goods or fabrics of undetermined origin, and also trimmed. So those are excluded. But anything that would be sold to the consumer at the point of sale for purposes of manufacture of a garment would be required to meet this definition and follow the care labeling definitions in this regulation. Also, textile wearing apparel means any finished garment or article of clothing that is made from a textile product, and this also includes leathers, used to cover and protect the body, including hosiery, but excludes footwear, hats, and other articles of clothing. So with that in mind, the regulation is pretty broad-based and it provides basic principles for carrying of your garments. The law goes on and says additionally that labels must be permanently attached and legible for the useful life of the product. The labels must be fastened so they can be easily found by the consumer at the point of sale. And if they cannot be visibly seen due to packaging, then it must be repeated on the outside packaging for the consumer to have access. Washing instructions are defined as well. So the law states that you have to wash by hand or machine and provide temperature if hot water will not harm the product. For any bleaches, including hypochlorite bleach, sodium perborate, hydrogen peroxide-based bleaches, if all commercially available bleaches can be used on a regular basis without harming the product, the label does not need to mention any bleach information. However, if you have a known type of bleach that could harm the product, then you must limit the use of the bleach that would be acceptable for use. So if chlorine bleach on a regular basis would remove the color from that product, for example, the label would say use only non-chlorine bleach when needed, provided the non-chlorine bleach is also safe. If the commercially available bleaches would harm the product and all of them are not acceptable, then you have to warn the consumer against use of any bleach by saying no bleach, do not bleach. The label must say whether the product should be dried by machine or some other method. For example, lay flat to dry, hang dry, and provide temperature if the temperature would harm the product. Provide temperature if high temperature would harm the product. Also indicating the ironing instruction as well. Ironing information must be provided if ironing will be needed on a regular basis to maintain the overall appearance of that product, and provide temperature if the hot iron would harm the product. An example of that would be like a crinkle fabric. You would not necessarily want to iron a crinkle fabric. So as a result, you would say, do not iron. So the warning must say, do not, no, or only. So the terms are regulated in the use of and when they are to be used for specific care instructions. Similarly, dry cleaning. A simple dry clean label can be used if all commercially available solvents can be used. If any solvent would harm the product, a safe solvent must be mentioned. For example, dry clean petroleum solvent would be an appropriate care label. If any part of a dry cleaning process would harm the product, the label would include a warning to avoid or modify the process. For example, dry clean, no steam. Professionally dry clean would only be used with instructions if modifying the process. So you can say professionally dry clean, no steam by itself, or professionally dry clean only is not adequate. So you have to place the limitation on the care instruction to warn the consumer or the external dry cleaner how to process that product. Dry clean only is a warning that the garment must be washed by hand. Garments can only be labeled dry clean only if there is evidence that washing will damage the garment. So it's very clear as to what the instructions would be. The regulation also states that all care instructions must be included. You can't avoid it unless, and you should have substantiation to support the label that you place, because the FTC, the mission of the Federal Trade Commission is to regulate and provide guidance to the industry for truth in labeling. So all your labels should be truthful and it should be able to be substantiated by testing. So with that, I want to show you on the next slide that specific care symbols can be used in place of written instructions or along with written instructions. The symbols can be used and are designated in the standard known as ASTM 5489-96C. And I am stressing the term 96C because this edition is the edition that is linked to the law. The FTC requires that care symbols be written in English, or if you're using care symbols, must be used in place of written instructions or along with written instructions. Keep in mind that in the US, care symbols, when they're used, they must be in a specific order, meaning washing, bleaching, drying, ironing, and dry cleaning, according to the regulation. I also want to mention that the use of the ISO 3758 symbols and the ASTM D5489-18 version of these symbols are not followed by the FTC at this time, unless they are accompanied by full care instructions written in English. So you can use those, but you need to specifically write them in English. You can't have just symbols alone. New symbols are being suggested by ASTM to the Federal Trade Commission for an updated version of the standard to follow the 18 version of the standard. So our scope is and what we're working on now is development of new symbols and also to promote them with the FTC. So what you see on this slide is a copy of an adjunct procedure referenced in the law and found under D 5489-96C, illustrating both the symbols to use and the appropriate designations for temperatures and cycles, or bands, if you will, of and which symbol would represent a band to use a specific cycle or solvent or chemical. This is referenced under ASTM D 5489-96C, and it serves as a guide. So under 5489-18C, we have a caveat statement that we have added explaining this to the user of the standard. So care labeling using symbols can be used by the purchaser to select textiles on the basis of care required without knowledge of the language. The FTC care labeling rule specifies the guide D 5489-96C symbols. Additional changes in words and symbols have been added to the guide, meaning the 18 version of the guide, which are not covered under 16 CFR 423. In the United States, when care symbols are to be included in a care label, the FTC requires you to follow the 5489-96C version. However, the symbols included in the standard, which is the later version, may be used if symbols are used in addition to full care instructions written in English wording. So it's a transitional period that we're in right now, and we've added that to our standard to coordinate efforts and work through it with the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. So our next steps is that the D 1362 committee is diligently working on a file which will be available to the industry to purchase in a printable format for brands to copy for production labels. So they're going to be individual PDF files, I believe, so that they can be reprintable for production. We are near completion and they should be available shortly. We also recommend and will be working with ASTM's legal staff to send a petition to the Federal Trade Commission to approve the updated version of this guide and point to it from the regulation. Although the regulation is not changing, it would change the standard that is referenced in the law and points to the ASTM, a more current version of the ASTM standard for update of symbols to be able to be used. So this is ongoing. A lot of work has gone into this. It is a stepwise approach because of the legal issue of it, but certainly the Federal Trade Commission and the federal agencies look to ASTM for the guidance and the expertise that we offer, and we are addressing issues that we see in the market. Just as an FYI, for example, the state of California has banned the use of perchloroethylene by a specific date. So the reason for these updates is to address other regulatory actions within the US and to update and have the most current version available for the industry to use. So with that, I thank you. On this last slide, I have added some reference guides from the Federal Trade Commission of where you can find the law and other guidance pieces of the current law that's enforced at this time. So I tried to make it as short and sweet as possible, and hope I haven't confused anyone because of the standard references. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ellen. Maybe before you leave the floor, we'd want to ask you a few questions with regard to the care labeling. And the question is, what is the care labeling of textiles, wearing apparel, and certain piece goods that are relevant when it comes to the regulations, guides available for the labeling, footwear, textiles, and the fashion accessories for the US market? Looking at it that they're coming from Africa. And in connection with that, we are asking, in the consideration of this regulation, does it affect the African textile and leather products if it is mandatory to perform testing to confirm the care instructions on the label? So we are asking this in relation to the products that are coming from Africa. Over to you, Ellen. Kindly respond to those questions.
Yes,
Very
of
briefly.
course. Okay, so 16 CFR 423 is a federal regulation in the United States. It is because it's a regulation, it is enforceable by law. So the Federal Trade Commission, by Truth in Labeling, has defined through the standard the terminology, the rules, the details of care labeling for all garments coming into the US. As part of Truth of Labeling, they do require testing to support the use of a care label on a garment. So with that, yes, it applies to both textiles and leather goods, and it would cover any type of wearing apparel that is imported, or actually fabric goods too, of piece goods. So with that, also the testing that would be required to support a care label could be done two ways. One would be to do a care label development. So you have a bulk production fabric, and you could actually test it with a type of care method and step up the cycles and temperatures till you reach the performance requirements that a brand is requiring for compliance. Or you could do a care label verification when you're submitting a product for testing. Care label verification will validate the use of the cautionary statements on the care label, and also that the cold, medium, hot temperatures are adequate for the product, and the product does not change overall for use of the care label. Testing includes both dimensional stability, color fastness to laundering, including color change, staining, self-staining, color fastness to crocking, which validates cautionary statements. Same thing for the color fastness to bleaches, whether it be chlorine and non-chlorine bleaches. And an overall appearance review of the product to make sure that the care instruction does not adversely affect the overall appearance of that garment and the integrity of the garment overall. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. And then for the response, and we really appreciate. So we are getting to the next, and members, let me apologize and ask for your patience. We are coming to the tail end of it. So our next presenter is Beatrice Mwasi. Beatrice Mwasi is an accomplished business innovation and management consultant with over 2 decades of experience in driving industrial and business development initiatives, particularly in the leather value chain, export trend, and quality management systems. Her work has a transformative impact in East Africa, supporting sustainable growth, local economic development, and SME capacity building. She specializes in value chain development, manufacturing, competitiveness, and quality infrastructure with a proven ability to deliver strategic interventions that enhance sector performance and align with the global standards. Beatrice serves as an industrial development consultant for the security. I think that's a terminology in French, in German. She has successfully led a number of high-impact projects that include the Little Leather collaboration with Africa, Leather and Leather Products Institute, the ILO and HITC, leather sector scoping, the Canadian quality infrastructure study. I think Beatrice is going to tell us how to pronounce some of these ones. A structure study for East Africa leather sector and the implementation of quality management systems within the East African community. Her dedication and contributions have earned her several prestigious awards for value chain development, export training, and innovation. Beatrice continues to shape industry framework as a founding board member of the Leather APEC Consortium of East Africa, the chairperson of Leather APEC Society of Kenya, and as a member of the Global Value Chain Group. Her strong communication skills, project management expertise, and strategic vision has made her a leading advisor and trainer in the sector, helping businesses and governments to unlock potential and achieve long-term competitiveness. Beatrice holds an MA Design Management from Middlesex University sorry for that, and BA in Industrial Design from the University of Sweden Institute of Management. She is currently pursuing a PhD in entrepreneurship at Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. In addition to her academic credentials, she has completed several short professional courses, including the Calendina Quality Infrastructure Development Methodology with the Federal Meteorological Institute, the State and Improve Your Business program by the International Labour Organization, and a certificate in local economic development from the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. She is also a certified export trainer through the Center of Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries, and has undergone specialized training on the implementation of harmonized East African community standards with Academy. So join me as we welcome Beatrice as she gives us a presentation on promoting the textiles and clothing value chain in African countries as a key pillar for African industrialization, economic development, the need for strategic policy orientation, and the construction of the domestic industry and regional value chains, the law of standardization in clearing regulatory structural bottlenecks. Welcome, Beatrice, and kindly give us your presentation. And I'm hoping and praying that the people will not be tired. We are almost coming to the tail end of it.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, or I can see it rather. I hope everyone else is able to see it.
If you can see it, they can see it. So thank you very much. The beauty about staying up to the last, you become a keen listener to almost all the presentations. This was such a a key topic, even to me as a person, and really looking forward to having Africa body measurements. I'm one of those people, when you go to the shop, you either get something that fits well on the West but doesn't fit well elsewhere, So I'm also informed, our first president in this country, in Kenya, he used to wear a size 10, but he would hardly find a shoe that, would fit him comfortably. And therefore, this conversation about, body measurements, especially Africa's body measurement, is such a key topic. But my presentation this evening is going to focus on the role of standardization in clearing the regulatory infrastructural bottleneck. This is in context of promoting the textile and leather value chains in Africa as key pillars for industrialization and economic development. So we will proceed. I think almost all speakers have presented and spoken to the importance of these two sectors and the potential they hold. And as we stand as a continent, we appreciate the fact that our economic performance has been impressive. Growing, modestly, but at least, growing. We also pride in the fact that we are host to about 9 of the world's, 20 fastest growing economies. And then when you look at that and the promise of growth, even going forward in 2024, we're given the promise of growth that going to grow at about 3.5. In 2024, that is up from about 3.2 in 2022. And we think that is not a bad thing as a continent. But, looking at it, we feel like it could be better. We could have performed better, especially if we stopped relying on, dealing in commodities. And therefore, our growth as a continent remains modest because of the over-reliance on commodity exports, which makes our growth as a continent very, very volatile. And so therefore, to realize the potential of this continent, to realize the potential of these two sectors, and that is textiles and leather, we must do more than holding conversation about market access. It requires a strategic policy reorientation so that we may reconstruct the domestic industry and strengthen the regional value chains. So specifically looking at, leather and the textile sector. So at the core of this transformation lies the critical role of standardization. By establishing uniform standards across borders, standardization will help clear regulatory infrastructure bottlenecks and therefore help us streamline compliance, help us foster a seamless integrated marketplace. So for that, then we can now begin talking about, harnessing the potential that lies within our borders. And this is very much in line with the vision of industrializing Africa. So standardization really rests at the core of this ambition of Africa really being able to, advance together as one common marketplace. So why textile and leather? We cannot, really emphasize enough that these are very key sectors, and they really hold in the potential for us to even, earn more than we are currently generating from the two sectors. I was looking at the figures as I was preparing for this presentation and realized No, we have the two sectors, especially now, we may begin with the textile sector, employing about 20 million people. On the other side, we have the leather sector that is employing about 2 million people. And I was asking myself why, having one sector on one side, employing 2 million and textile 20, and realize, the textile sector as we speak now has, is quite vibrant, and mainly because of some would say the cut, make, and trim, approach to developing the sector, whereby we're able, to have a factory set up and, collaborating with other, companies from developed countries to be able to fashion and manufacture their products locally. And for that, we had, the likes of export processing zones coming up. We have initiatives such as AGOA that were able to, open, markets and have textile products made locally. But now looking on the side of leather, 90% of the material that we are dealing in we are exporting is actually semi-processed, whereby you find that we are dealing with, wet blue or chrome leather, and that constitutes about 80 to 85% of what we're dealing, and about 5% of raw hides and skins. So meaning minimal value addition other than the fact that we are getting the hides and skins from the tanneries and just packaging them and preparing them for exports. So really, if you look at it, especially if you look at the leather sector, it presents great potential for value addition. So the value chain, beginning at, even if we were to cut off the farm level and start up value chain at the production of hides and skins, still there's so much in terms of employment creation and the prospects for transferring from production of hides and skins into the tanneries, where we get to add value. And now at tannery level, we are looking at moving from dealing in semi-processed and getting into the finished form of leather. And with the finished form of leather, now we can even kick it upwards to finished products. So we still really are scratching the surface, especially of the leather sector, and therefore this sector presents great potential to really impact, socially and economically across the continent. Statistically, it is said if you added value up to the tail and like moving, leather from its raw form straight up to having a finished product, you will have added value 12-fold from what you will earn when you are dealing, or when we are dealing with a semi-processed material. In terms of, if I could just quickly touch on employment creation, right now most of our footwear into the continent is imported, although we have a couple of countries that are really, doing a good job in terms of also creating footwear for export. But if we were to look at the population that we have in Africa, and here we're looking at about 1.5 billion people, and looking at, the 0.8 per capita uptake of footwear, that really, shows us that as a continent, we need about 1.2, pairs of shoes on an annual basis. What does that mean? It basically means whether the shoes are made out of, textile material, talking about canvas, or whether they are made out of leather, annually we need 1.2 pairs of footwear to clad our people, for our people to wear. So for these, shoes, if you look at, how many pairs of shoes, one particular person can make in a manufacturing establishment, we are given an average of between, 3.2 for SMEs up to about 6. So if we take an average of about 5 pairs that can be made per person, you already see, even with footwear, and this is just one kind of product that can be fashioned in this particular industry. So footwear alone, you will find that we need more than 900,000 people to be able to produce. So these particular sectors present a lot of prospects for wealth creation and really creating employment. And this is if we are able to, put in place infrastructure that will facilitate us to add value so that we stop dealing in commodities, basically, semi-processed or raw materials for export. So they also now, given that most of players in this particular industry are SMEs, and most of the production methodology can easily be swayed into sustainable manufacturing practices. This is also a very big opportunity for us as a continent to start looking into how we can set ourselves, organize ourselves in a manner that we can appeal through practicing sustainable manufacturing practices. So why are they important? What is it? How are they prospective? Why do we think that they are very strong pillars for industrialization? One, because of the abundance of raw materials, and both textile, some of the world's leading growers of cotton are found in Africa. Africa is home to the second largest livestock population. As we speak today, we are hosting about 400 herds of cattle, sheep, and goats, leave alone other animals that still give us leather as raw material. So therefore we have a very strong and solid raw material base to be able to industrialize upon. So these are very solid, two solid sectors that we can comfortably vouch for to be a base for our industrial offtake. So secondly, when you look at the current landscape, the market landscape, we have a growing appreciation for things Africa. In the past, it was very difficult for us to be able to sell, locally made product, because people assumed products that are made things elsewhere, things Europe, things in every market were superior. But right now, as we speak, we have a very, growing appreciation for local products. I was in Ethiopia, and I was pleasantly surprised that when you are in the Ethiopian market and you're looking for example, leather footwear, they have faith and trust in the made in Ethiopia leather footwear. They know that is genuine, that is authentic, and it's durable. And for that, to me, that was a win, because it is a 360 coming from a point whereby people feel, things outside are better than things local, to a point whereby now there is a shift that things local are also of good quality. And secondly, of course, there is also, growing preference to manufacturing in Africa. Of course, it started with Asia, and now, slowly moving into Africa. We've seen, a lot of multinational companies manufacturing, especially in countries like South Africa and countries like Ethiopia, and we are seeing this is a good trend, and therefore positioning these two sectors to be able to uptake this opportunity will be a key. Africa has a youthful, population with an average of about, I think we say we are a young continent of about 20, years old, and whereby, about 60% are below the age 25. This particular, population can easily uptake emerging technology. I'm happy that we were talking about, 3D body measurements, earlier, and many other, smart manufacturing technologies that are coming up. We can easily educate, the youthful population that we have, and convert them to be, a resource, labor resource to these two particular sectors. So we have a lot that is really aligned to be able to support the takeoff of these particular sectors to become, key pillars for industrialization. Okay, so what opportunities do we have at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? Lots of them. Number one, by virtue of the fact that we have these 54 countries coming together, they really open up. As I just said, you have a whole population of about 1.5 billion people to serve, with a GDP of about, 3 trillion USD. So this is such a huge market. And if we organize and position ourselves better in terms of really being able to, live true to, opening our markets for the continent, then this is such a, a lucrative opportunity for all of us in Africa. Regional integration also, it presents an opportunity for value chains to collaborate, for us to share knowledge, across borders. So it's no longer about, each country trying to duplicate, replicate what each one is doing and, trying to do everything A to Z individually. But, by coming together, by integrating, we, as we may focus on what we are good at, what you're competitive at, and based on, what you can do. And the perfect examples is whereby, in Kenya, we know that Tanzania is better in terms of cotton fabric. And you'll find that most traders will prefer going to Tanzania for cotton fabrics. South Sudan is very good in terms of supplying, raw hides and skins. Same to Burundi and other countries. Kenya is good at, turning, because of the tanneries that we have, and therefore converting the raw hides and skins into materials, and looking at countries like, Tunisia, countries like Egypt, countries like Ethiopia, very good. South Africa, very good in manufacturing. So how can we learn? How can we, collaborate and integrate the value chains? But for this, we also need to harmonize our regulations and standards so that we are able to speak the same language and be on the same page when we talk about integrating. By also coming together as a a continent and Africa continental free trade area, we are able to also, start having the conversation of really, coming up with the ability, generating and enhancing our ability to meet not only local standards, but also, having the capability to meet international standards. And by so doing, then we are able to even also advance our market, competitiveness, and in this case also the export market. We are also beginning to have conversations, when we talk about, having this one common market, then we are also holding conversation about really having one, common brand at the marketplace. Right now, in each country, of course, we are pushing, national brands. You will hear in Kenya, we are talking about Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. Tanzania, we'll talk about Buy Tanzania, Build Tanzania. Same to other countries. Everybody's trying to push their national brand. But the coming together of, the African nations, then we front a common, we have a common front, and, we're probably beginning to front Buy Africa, Build Africa. Yeah. So what are some of these challenges we are facing? The challenges are bound. And the very first one, as you can see, is, the fragmentation of regulations, whereby you'll find that, each country in Africa has their own set of regulations. And, we find that, if we are not, we are talking about having a common market, but we are not having, we are not harmonizing our regulations, we are not having the same language, then you find that it is going to be complicated and, aborting the initial intention of the coming together of, the various nations under African continental free trade area. So therefore, one of the most pressing challenges across Africa is the existence of the fragmented and inconsistent regulatory frameworks. So these disparities hinder the smooth flow of goods and services across borders, undermining, therefore, the efforts to build an integrated value chain. So different countries across Africa, as it is today, have varied regulations, as I've said, and standards that are, governing the production label and export of textile and leather products. So this fragmentation creates uncertainty for businesses, making it difficult for manufacturers to operate across multiple markets. Inconsistencies, number two, is inconsistencies in standards for textile and leather products across Africa countries, therefore presenting a major challenge for market access. When each country sets its own, initially we're talking about the regulation. So here, each country is setting its own, standards for product quality, product safety, product labeling, and environmental compliance. It creates barriers for producers who aim to trade across borders. So number three, bottlenecks in certifications. These, slows and and creates inefficiencies in certification process across the continent, and also creates bottlenecks that disrupt the production timelines, and they also hinder competitiveness of products. So therefore, what is the strategic role of standardization? So standardization, number one, will help clear regulatory bottlenecks, harmonizing regulations across different markets, and therefore helping eliminate regulatory bottlenecks that slow down trade and investment in Africa. When all regions, across the continent adhere to the same standards, it will simplify compliance for manufacturers and exporters. Harmonize the standards will ensure that products can move across borders without having to undergo modifications, repeated modifications, especially. This can be very difficult for SMEs. So standardization can also help reduce complexity and the duration of certification process by establishing clear, uniform criteria for product approval. A common standard across countries allows products to be certified once and accepted in multiple markets, and therefore reducing the time and cost associated with obtaining multiple certification. And it's also, harmonized standards are also key to realizing the full potential of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area by ensuring that regulatory alignment across countries are adhered to. Standardization also promotes the free flow of goods and services, enhancing regional integration and making it easier for the businesses to operate across borders without facing trade barriers. So secondly, it also boosts consumer confidence, because when textile and leather products adhere to recognize the standards, so consumers can be confident that they are purchasing goods that meet stringent quality standards. And therefore, this will lead to greater consumer satisfaction and loyalty, ultimately boosting demand for the made in Africa products. So third, of course, it will promote sustainability, as earlier discussed, because through establishing standards and encouraging sustainability, given the fact that sustainability is a very key component of market access, especially as we begin to think about growing our exports. So, and therefore, through standardization, we will be able to excel and be able to enable our products to be compliant. For standardization, we'll be able to enhance innovation, because through standards, standardization will be able to invest on innovation, so that the products that we are producing as a continent are able to adhere to the various, requirements and standards as expected by the various markets. So standards serve as a platform for the adoption of new technologies and practices, fostering innovation in production, processes, product design, and business model advancement. So in conclusion, I would say standardization is key to unlocking Africa's potential in the leather and textile sector. But this calls on various governments across Africa to be able to invest in advancing the infrastructure that we have, so that we fast track the adoption of harmonized standards across Africa, therefore for us to be able to realize the Africa continental free trade dream of really having this common market available for the businesses across Africa. So for this, I would say call upon the acceleration of harmonization of the standards and the support to various bodies that are charged with advancing national quality infrastructure, so that they are capable to be able to dispense their responsibility to contribute towards the harmonization of standards. We are also calling on providing incentives for compliance and innovation, because sometimes this can be expensive, especially for SMEs. So if it is incentivized, and therefore calling on governments, calling on stakeholders and all the partners to be able to incentivize for compliance and also for investment in quality infrastructure across the region. We are calling for fostering collaboration for regional value chains, and therefore calling on the value chains not to operate on silos, but to be able to start integrating and be able to share best practice across the region, so that when we are talking about integration, we are not just talking about the availability of the continental market, but we are also talking about the availability of the knowledge that is abound across the various nations, and collaborations of value chains, so that together we can augment what we have for competitiveness when it comes to the global markets. So it is an opportunity. The SCFTA presents a great opportunity for us as a nation to be able to mobilize, including the private sector, so that we are able to drive standardization and allowing standardization, letting standardization pave or permit the advancement of the coming together of the various markets and exploiting opportunities that the textile and leather sectors have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Beatrice. Actually, I had a few questions for you, but you've tackled them because I was to ask you about the key pillars in the African industrialization agenda, which you have actually highlighted very well. Abundance of wealth, resources, global and local markets, emerging technologies, and also the youthful generation that we have in the continent. You've also highlighted the regulatory challenges in the textile and leather, which was very good, and you've also tackled the strategies. You've tackled how strategic standardization and quality infrastructure process is, especially in the context of AFCFTA. So thank you so much. At this particular moment now, I would like to bring this to a close. And how I'm going to do it, I will request all the presenters. So, Madam Beatrice, we don't have questions for you because we've already tackled them in the presentation. Starting with the Clementine, in that order, Dr. Loso Otieno, Mr. Marose, Madam Helen, and Madam Beatrice, just 30 minutes each. You just tell us an highlight or a takeaway message from your presentation, starting with the Clementine very fast, because our time is much spent and most of the participants have actually left. Clementine, very fast.
Thank you, moderator. For my takeaway message on industrialization in Africa, can the continent make it? So let's, I feel strongly that with a strong industry to create jobs and add value to the raw material, Africa country risk remaining stuck by jobless and the poverty. So we need to change our mindset as Africans. We invest more in African product, we promote our African product and trade within the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Rose Otieno?
I don't see
Dr. Rose Otieno with us? Okay, then you could go to Mr. Malose, please.
Probably not, so you can move. We can actually move very fast. If Rose is here, if you are able to hear, your last word.
Okay, it looks like they're put out. Madam Helen?
Yes, if I understood the correct
Is Rose there, Dr. Rose?
question correctly. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, just last
Yes, we
word.
can hear you. Go ahead.
Take-home message.
Okay, so for import into the US, the one understanding is that any kind of labeling would require truth in labeling and to have substantiation for the label that you're claiming. So that's the basic bottom line, and what the FTC would look for from a labeling, whether it be care labeling also would affect things like performance claims as well. So if you put water resistance on a product, for example, testing should be supportive of the water resistance. And in fact, there's, other requirements beyond that. So please feel free to ask, because we can advise, proper testing for compliance with labeling. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Madam Beatrice?
Thank you very much. I will say standardization is the key to unlocking Africa's potential in textile and leather. So therefore, we are calling on an urgent action by governments, industry leaders, and regional bodies to come together to fast-track the adoption of harmonized standards, investing in quality infrastructure, and building sustainable competitive value chains. Africa has resources, it has talents, and a market to transform these sectors. What is needed now is decisive coordinated action to drive the transformation in Africa. So standardization is the way to go.
Thank you, Madam Beatrice. Dr. Luz is back. Dr. Luz, 30 seconds.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
we can.
Yes, I couldn't unmute myself, but thank you for your patience. Mine are just 2 points. The first point is that I'm calling upon us for partnerships, for scanning technology. Remember, we have talked about competitiveness, and we are talking about cutting edge technology. In body measurements, 3D body scanning is key to competitiveness. Let's think about it as we go around Africa to measure the African body and make it very competitive so that we can use it in manufacture and everything. The second one is on secondhand clothing. I would propose for regulation and balance. We cannot do away with them. There are so many other advantages. But I would propose that we think of regulation through policies and also balance. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, panelists, for very insightful presentations. And I'm hoping that I've not closed out any questions from the panel, from the floor, because I'm not seeing any question. There are just comments of how the presentation was and the insightful and all that. Thank you so much. And thank you, ARSO, for giving me this opportunity to moderate this session. I want to hand over the meeting to Mr. Luben. Mr. Luben, over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lydia. You've done a wonderful job. I thank you all the panelists for the wonderful presentations. I think we went over our time by quite a lot, more than 1 hour. But that's because of the kind of information you had, and I think we've learned a lot. Now, just a quick one that, yes, we know that nations are branding, but there is something we are calling Made in Africa that will be coming on so that we can have a collective kind of understanding of the origin of the products. Secondly, the harmonization of standards is ongoing, and I would like to see that we participate, substantively. And in that project, we shall be having some certification, some pilot certification, which we are going to undertake in the textiles and also in the leather industries. So we shall be looking forward to doing some few pilot certifications. Yes, on AGOA, we know from the very beginning that issues of standards are what was limiting our access to the American market, and therefore we need to look at the standards keenly and ensure that we can comply with those standards. On second-hand clothing, yes, we need a balance. We have written a position paper to the African Union on that, and we need to tackle that in a very coherent manner so that we don't cause lots of disruptions. Yeah, thank you on those presentations. And the next webinar we shall be having will be with the Kingdom of Morocco, and that will be 27th of November. That will be handling the issue of industrialization and the automotive industry. So that's another value chain that we shall be looking at during that time. It will be an interesting area also because it utilizes what we have just discussed about the leather and textiles. For any vehicle that you look at, you'll find all those things. Because of the time, I don't think we shall be taking long. What we may require is just so that those who are able to, turn on their cameras, we quickly take your photos, if you can do that. If you can quickly do your cameras, and then we take the photos. Are we able to take the photos? Our IT team? IT? You tell us when you're done, when you finish. Are you quick enough? IT. It's a photo, not a drawing.
Take when people are smiling.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I hope you have done. They are doing a drawing, I think, or a painting.
I'm sure they are finished by now.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I think we'll be happy to see you again in the next webinar. And thank you all for your participation. We don't take it for granted. We look forward to the collaboration that we have been called upon in ensuring that we can drive this process forward. And we thank our collaborating partners from STM. You know, those are the standards you have to comply with when you are taking your products to the USA. So thank you all. See you next time when we have another event. Goodbye for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.